everybody. We are back. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had a new amazing lady that you should know, and I'm so excited about this one. So many of you know that I'm in the Leadership Coachella Valley, which is a new passion of mine, and they're introducing us to so many wonderful things around the valley. We had a fantastic opportunity to be at Quinta High School, which is where I met Dr. Farah. We're going to go into that a little bit further. However, she is the activities director at Quinta Middle. And the reason why I had her here today is I got to meet some of her students there, and I just was so impressed with them, and I want to first dive into what that program is that we were learning about that day.
Of course. So I have the honor of being the activities director. I oversee 4 leadership programs at Quinta Middle School. I have ASB, which is essentially student council.
Sure.
Renaissance, which focuses on school culture. I have WEB, which stands for Where Everybody Belongs, and that's a mentor program to our 6th graders. And then I also have our yearbook kids. So I get the opportunity to work with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and help grow them into the great leaders I know they can be.
Yeah, and I've heard ASB, Renaissance, yearbook. I've heard these things before. I've never seen such a result as I saw that day. They were it happened to be all ladies, which,
hey,
they were, right? They were so well-spoken. They stood in the room full of 50 adults. They didn't stumble over their words. They were so how do you get from a 6th grader to an 8th grader that does that?
So for me as an educator, I believe my purpose in life, there's 4 words that I really think of when it comes to our youth. It is inspire, educate, empower, and celebrate. And I think through teaching those 4 things, I get the opportunity to see them grow. Starting in 6th grade, I love it when I can actually work with them for all 3 years, because you do get the kids that come in, they're very nervous, very meek, and then I'm constantly pushing them. I often say, as an educator, we're like a mirror, and we hold it up to them to remind them of who they are and who they will become, because sometimes they don't even know how to dream big. They're so scared. They haven't had a lot of opportunities. And I think my job as an educator, especially a leadership teacher, is to provide opportunities and access, and then give them the tools to do that. So whether it's like right now, they went through all of the recent campaign flyers that we were being overwhelmed with in the mail. So they went through all of them, and they did the pros and cons, what they liked about them, what they disliked. And right now they're creating their own campaign flyers. And so from there, then they get up and they speak. I work with them on their public speaking. So there's constantly time to grow. One of the biggest things, I'm always saying 2 things to them: lead by example. I think that anything we ask of our student body or our staff, we have to be able to do as leaders, because it's really, they're following our actions. The other one is, I really believe in, it's okay to make mistakes as long as we're reflecting and we do better and we be better the next time. And so after every single event that we do, we sit back down as a class and we go over, we call it cheers and changes. And so we think of all the things that we did well, and then all of the things that we can improve for the next time, so that we revisit that before we hold a similar event, and then we really are growing. And so I think it's this constant need that I want from them to evolve and constantly be growing. And they know that we're never done. We're always looking at, even today in class, we were going over a survey. We did a school culture survey, and we were going over the results and how we can be better and help our campus grow.
Yeah. I was just thinking right now, that conversation and that reflection on what we did and how we can make it better. And that's what we do as adults.
Yes.
And I'm doing that constantly in my business. I just came from something doing that. And starting them at this age really helps them to learn how to negotiate, communicate, collaborate, and think outside the box.
Absolutely.
I mean, I love this. I love it so much.
Thank you.
And also the idea of thinking big.
Yes.
Right? Our life is as big as we build it. And would you agree that there is often even unintentional boundaries that kids are given?
Absolutely. And not to sound like a feminist, but I call myself an equalist. But
I like that.
Right. And so I think sometimes, if I go back to my school right now, my entire board is all female. And I see that I get the opportunity to travel across the country and work with student leadership programs. And a lot of them are women. And but sometimes we have gender roles or stereotypes, and I think sometimes in situations, depending on who you're surrounding yourself with, sometimes we as females, and this could be for everybody, but as my own personal experience, sometimes to fit in or make someone else happy, we feel like we have to dream a little smaller to make ourselves a little bit less because maybe somebody thinks we're too much. And I think for me, my job as a strong woman is to show our young ladies and all of my students that they do need to dream big. And sometimes those dreams can be bigger than what their families even thought for them.
Often,
sometimes they don't even know how to dream that big. And so for me, it's to show them opportunities. And I think that's one of the things that I try to do is I'm born and raised in the Coachella Valley. And for me, I didn't get a lot of opportunities to leave the valley. I always knew that I would go get educated and come back and make a difference in my own community. But for me at this age with these kids, I try to get them out as often as possible. So we're out of the area, we're attending leadership conferences where they have the opportunity to network with other students from across Southern California. And they get the opportunity to see other leadership kids, network with them, listen to amazing keynote speakers that are so motivational. And so I think giving the students those opportunities, it's allowing them to expand those dreams and make them even bigger than what they had originally thought.
Right. I mean, starting that conversation when they're at this age, when they are really more open to thinking differently, to, collaborating with somebody different and from a different place. Their minds are still big and their acceptance is still really big. And I think that's such an amazing thing. So born and raised in India, you go into the education system. How did you find yourself like in this position?
Growing up, I had always been involved in student leadership. So back at Jefferson Middle School, I was ASB president. Indio High School as a Raja, I was ASB president. I remember telling my activities director that one day I was going to come back and take his job. And I always knew I wanted to be an educator. I knew I wanted to stay in my own community. Unfortunately, when I was in high school, and I would be the first in my immediate family to not only attend but graduate from college. So it was a very big deal for me to go and finish. I was sitting in my high school counseling session. My counselor said, "Farah, what are your plans after high school?" And with confidence, I said, "I'm going to college and I'm going to be a teacher." And what I would have expected him to say was, "Have you applied for financial aid? Are you staying local? What grade level do you want to teach?" But instead, his words that have stayed with me all these years later, he said, "I'm sorry, Farah, but going to college and becoming a teacher will be too hard for someone like you." And in that moment, and I think back now, and as I talk, like I said, to students around the country, I share that story because I think often those most painful moments sometimes become our superpower as long as we share it with other people and it become their guide. And so one of the things that in that moment, I gave him my power. I let him limit who I thought I was going to be. I walked out believing him until I came home to my mom and she reminded me who I was.
That's right.
She straightened my crown and she said, "Oh, hell no. Not only will you go to college and become a teacher, but you'll go back and get even more college and one day you'll become this man's boss." And so thank God I have my mom and reminding me, who I am and what I'm capable of. And so I spread that message. And so now my message to young people, and I guess older people alike, that when the world says you can't, you have to stand up and say, "Watch me." Right. And the best revenge is that you prove them wrong. You don't have to say anything, let your actions prove them wrong. And so I always say to the little girl, he said would never go to college. I went to college for 12 years. I have 4 degrees, including my doctorate from USC.
Wow.
And to the little girl, he said would never become a teacher. I'm in my 24th year of teaching in Desert Sands where I grew up. Wow. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher since I was 7. Right. I knew later on that I wanted to definitely become an activities director and a leadership teacher. And I taught English for 17 years, but I have really found my place in student leadership. And they are just magical. Yeah. I look at them and I think sometimes, when we turn on the news and when we see what's going on in the world with adults, I look into my classroom and I think there's so much hope for the future. Because you had the opportunity to meet a few of them, and they are all that amazing.
You know what? It's very true. We talked about it a little bit before we started, but you just hear so much negativity about the youth, and you hear so much like, "Oh, well, what are we going to do?" And I was so really left speechless. And you had to remind me that they were middle school girls. I was thinking we were at the high school, so And again, though, it's people like yourself who go back to the little girl that you once were,
Yes.
because the fact that somebody was in a position to tell you, and it's interesting because when I was growing up, I graduated valedictorian. Nobody spoke to me about going to college. The high school counselor never talked to me ever. I didn't know how to do any of those things. And as a result, I didn't move forward on any of those things. And it's a similar situation, just no words.
Right.
Like, you're not important enough to invest the time and energy to do this.
Exactly.
And so here you are, like, doing that over to your former self over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
Because sometimes that person isn't the counselor. Maybe it's their parent.
Right.
Or their older sibling or their friends. Right. And having that advocate is huge.
Absolutely. And I love that you said advocate, because I think there's that saying that be the adult that you needed when you were a kid.
In my mind. In my mind.
And I think that's what we've become. You working with your young girls, in your organization and that you volunteer with, and then same thing with mine. I think back, who is the person that I needed in my life? And fortunately, I had my mom to remind me, but not every young person or adult even has that person in their life. And so hopefully we can become that person for everyone.
And I think I'm a big believer, in affecting change.
Yes.
But I also think that there's this focus on this large scale, like doing thousands of things that, when really, it really just begins in the classroom, in your case, with a few handful of kids who are willing and able and the support of that. And then those people go on and they do the same thing. And that's really how long-term change happens.
Absolutely. You just have to start small.
You just have to start small. I love that. And, you're Dr. Farah now.
Yes.
and I love that. And, I think if you don't mind, kind of touching base on that, because our identity, our names, it changes, especially as women, right?
Ooh,
as we get older, we're this person and that. And you had a really amazing story of sort of like, a rewriting of, or establishing your identity. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think being an educator and using my last name as my title, that changes. And often that is, in the case of women, often more than men, we change our last name when we get married, or if we get divorced, like in my case, we're trying to change our name back. And so for me, I had my dad's last name my very first year of teaching, and then I got married, and I had my husband's name for many, many years. Things didn't work out. He chose it was his choice to leave. And I kept that last name for a very long time. And I think a lot of it was, one, because it was my identity as an educator, that all my students knew me by that last name. And two, my sons, John and Brandon, that was their last name. And so my oldest son was killed in a car accident little over 9 years ago. And my younger son, he was an adult, he's 24 now. And so a couple of years ago, it was actually during COVID, I went to my younger son and I said, what are your thoughts on me changing my last name back? And he said, Mom, do you? I see you. And in addition to that, because I am in the public speaking world, and I got a book deal.
Yeah.
So there were all these things that I didn't necessarily, I wanted to honor my parents.
Right.
I wanted my parents' names back. And so I submitted the petition and had a virtual court hearing, and sat there with my parents. Had a picture of both sets of grandparents in my hands when the judge said, congratulations, you are now Dr. Farah Ortega-Choate. And so I have been able to reclaim myself. And, sometimes, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that go through divorces. And I know they say that it's very similar to a loss of a marriage, a death. And for me, I didn't know who I was outside of that marriage. And like many of us, we start to lose ourselves. And I started losing me in that marriage, trying to please, trying to be someone that I thought he wanted or needed. And all of a sudden I was alone. And for me, one of my favorite things to do is to dance. And so I love to dance. I'll be heading to dance class at EOS right after this. And I know for me, for that 1 hour, it's like I have a reunion with myself on the dance floor. And so after the divorce, it was me reuniting with myself
Right.
and finding the best parts of me that I had lost, but then also discovering the parts of me that I was holding back.
Sure.
And so I think every day, and do I have slip ups where sometimes I miss what was familiar? Absolutely. But then it's this idea, do I have to make myself smaller to fit in someone else's world? Or should I just be fully me? Take it or leave it. I might be too much for some people, but I know I'll be enough for the right person. And
Right.
so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. I also divorced and really understand the idea of like losing yourself in that for whatever the dynamic is.
Yes.
Because you have to be smaller, you can't shine your light because of whatever. And I can remember distinctly after, you know, going through the loss of, right, for it's like 20 years of your life, right? The lightness that I felt, right? Like just how you could just go be yourself, reinvent that. Like, what does it look like for you? And you find your people. And your person finds you. And there is no having to make yourself small for that person. There's no having to, you know, be this way or that. It's just like you in all of your glory.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's such a gift. And also for your, you know, your friends and things like that too. And more importantly too, for all of the young people that you essentially mentor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to touch on, you said you're an equalist.
Yes.
And I love that so much because we're all about women and women empowerment and lifting them up. And I don't think that has to include saying that men are bad.
Right.
Like that's not the case. So I really appreciate, because you obviously do the same thing for young men too.
Yes, absolutely.
And having that strong woman to look up to is a huge deal.
And I think for me, growing up, my parents always wanted a son, ended up with 4 daughters. My poor father, at one point in his life, he had 4 teenage daughters, 13, 15, 17, and 19, all in one house with one phone and a really long cord. And
oh my gosh.
And so that was our family growing up. And so no boys. And then I'm a boy mom. I have my 2 sons. And so I believe so much in empowering our young ladies, but I also do the same for our young men. And everything I've ever taught them, whoever it is, whichever student I'm teaching, I just want them to see one's not better than the other, and we don't have to tear someone else down in order for us to be lifted. And so, you know, going back when I was talking about teaching my students about the campaign posters, we were talking about mudslinging, and I said in their campaign poster that they are working on, they must remain positive. And there, you know, there's that saying that you don't, you know, burning out someone else's candle doesn't make yours burn brighter.
Right.
And so that's really who I want them to be as leaders, is we don't have to tear anyone down. Everybody can remain positive. We should all be equal. I don't think one group is more important than the other. I think just we have to see everybody. I'm really big on celebrating diversity, including everyone. And I think I lead with my heart, and that's really something that I try to teach to my students.
Yeah, and that authentic piece.
Yes.
Right. And and which allows them to understand that they can be their authentic selves too. You know, I actually have my second session of Ophelia tomorrow for my 4th year, and the first session involves like, what do you need from us? What do you need from each other? What we need from you? And we write down all these words, and like the first one is authenticity.
Yes.
Like, we want you to be you and feel that it's a safe place to do so. And we also want to do the same.
Yes.
And I think that idea is kind of lost in all of the things you have to fit into while you're going through that time in your life.
Right.
And being allowed to be authentic really allows you to kind of excel in where you need to be.
And I think that when we can stand in who we are, it sets that example for them. And so I'm very honest with my students. You know, if I come in and I'm having a rough day and I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm a little below the line here. And my buddy of mine, he's another speaker, Tom Cody, talks about living above the line. And I'll say, hey, today I'm a little bit below the line. I'm okay sharing that with them. They get to see a little bit of my mental health and my journey. Sometimes when I'm not feeling good, or maybe I'm insecure and I'm doing this comparison, I think that's human nature. But it's to recognize that, and then even to like own. I tell a story to my students about growing up and sometimes being embarrassed of what my mom would fix me for lunch, you know, and my mom, and a lot of them can relate. So growing up, my mom's side is Mexican, and I always wanted the little perfectly triangle cut sandwich like Kimberly, but my mom would put the burrito wrapped in a napkin, wrapped in foil inside the paper bag. And I remember thinking like, oh, I don't want to be this. And I was trying to hide it. And then I grew to a place I'm like, dang it, I'd take a burrito over a sandwich any day.
Right.
And so I know it's a simple example of a little elementary girl.
It is so true.
It is. You have to own who you are. I always tell the kids, I think there's two things. You have to never forget where you came from, but you also can't lose sight of where you're going. And I think we should be extremely proud of our heritage, our culture. We should celebrate that. I can celebrate who I am, but also celebrate who you are and where you come from. I don't think we have to think one is better than the other. And so when we show up as our authentic selves, it gives the person sitting across from us to show up and be themselves. And I think especially when we're working with young people, they need to see the real us. They need to see us. And when we share, we have those lows too. We're not perfect. Like I can pull up and they can only see Dr. Farah, who has her doctorate from USC. But if I don't share the other story of the girl who had to work 3 part-time jobs and I was a single mom and worked my butt off to get here, they may not know the work that I had to put in and that there are struggles. And I think that that's something, especially I think post-COVID, I'm seeing more students not have as much grit as they used to. And so I think that's something we have to have those open conversations with the kids. Like, yeah, sometimes it's going to suck and life's going to knock you down.
And you got to get through
that.
But
you got to get back up. And there are people that are going to help you get back up. And I think that's why I guess my plea would be to adults is be a mentor like you're doing, like I'm doing. There are so many young people out there that need us, especially our young women. And so if you can get out there and mentor them and give them an easier path than what we had, I think we're supposed to, as we're moving forward, we can't forget to reach back and help someone else get there. I just actually saw the president of Mexico just mentioned that when she arrives, she doesn't arrive alone. She's bringing others with her. And I think that's so important when we get to that place of success. One, we have to thank the people whose shoulders we stand on. And two, we have to turn around and help someone else get there. And when we get that seat at the table, we need to make sure that we're making more room so that we're helping other people have voices as well.
Exactly. I just love all of that so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. You've mentioned your mom a lot.
Yes.
So we know she's a badass bitch for sure.
Oh, totally.
Any other people in your life along the way that you really kind of say, they're one of the reasons why I'm here?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Oprah Winfrey.
Okay.
So let me tell you about this one. Being a young girl, running home, and it's 3 o'clock. Where'd everybody go? Oprah's on. I would run home, and you wouldn't really expect an elementary or middle school girl to be running home to watch Oprah.
Sure.
But I loved the way she made her guests feel. It was honestly like this. It's like just sitting down and having a conversation with a friend. And so ultimately in 2010, I was selected as one of her ultimate viewers. I got to travel with her to Australia.
What? Yes. Like with her? Like on the same plane?
We were supposed to be on the same plane. She got some little award, the Kennedy award. And so
Oprah, hello.
The president was with her. So she flew separately. But I know.
Well, I guess.
Sometimes I forget to tell my students from year to year, and then they'll just see a photo and they're like, is that you and Oprah? And so, it's interesting because you have people that you look up to. And of course, I do tell my mom, she's one of them, like, thank you for being the woman that you are and helping me be the woman I am. But there's also those other ones that we see on TV, those celebrities that she's just incredible. She is self-made and so authentic and gives back to her community and everywhere. And so to be able to sit like this and say, thank you for helping me become the woman I am. And I remember telling her, Oprah, if I wasn't a teacher, I think I'd be a talk show host where I could use my words to impact the world and make a difference. And she said, well, Farah, if I wasn't a talk show host, I'd be a teacher.
Really?
And I had run into her a couple years later at an event, and I remember explaining that I kind of wanted to do this speaking thing, but I was so scared to leave the classroom. And she said 2 things. She said, sometimes you have to think bigger, the classroom doesn't have to be four walls, because I have the title of teacher, but we can all be educators. You're an educator,
right?
As long as we're teaching someone else and we're making a difference. The second thing she said, she gave a baseball analogy, and she said, you can't steal second with your foot still on first. And I think sometimes we get into this space where we're so comfortable and we see that next thing we want to go for, and we start to lead off, and then we rush back because it's safe. But we'll never know that sweet success unless we're willing to run and go grab it.
Risk it.
Exactly.
And risk the failure.
Yes. And risk the failure. There's something that I do sometimes with my students called Failure Fridays. And I think it's where we normalize failure. I think sometimes we're so afraid to make a mistake that we don't even move forward.
Yeah.
And so if we teach them, like, it's okay to fail. And guess what we're going to now do? We're going to talk about our failure, and then we're going to give each other tips. If we learn to do that, I think we're more likely to take more risks. And so Oprah, definitely one of those other people. Here's another one, Linda Carter, Wonder Woman. I'm a huge one. I have a Wonder Woman tattoo.
Oh my God.
If you were to go in my classroom, I have a huge
I remember like the Wonder Woman cape you were wearing the day we were there. Oh, yes. Sure.
And so I've also had the opportunity to meet Linda Carter and Gal. I had the opportunity to take my students.
And Gal too?
Yes, and the director of Wonder Woman. I got an opportunity to, when Linda Carter got her star in Palm Springs, to be able to be the people who greeted her. And then I had her sign some Wonder Woman cufflinks and an underoos. So from a girl who grew up with them. Yeah. And then I got to take a group of students when I was teaching at Indio High School. We got to go to a screening of the Wonder Woman movie in Palm Springs. And for her, like I said, some of these people I've only met one or two times. And actually Linda Carter, when I wear a picture of my angel son, and she had asked me one time, she was doing a concert out here, and she said, who's this on your chest? And I said, this is my son, John. He was killed in a car accident when he was 22, and his college roommate fell asleep at the wheel. And she just looked at me, and she had these pre-signed photos that she was giving out. And she called an assistant over, and she said, go get me a blank one. And then she personalized it for me. And then she looked at me, and when she said, oh, he's around my son's age. And then she held my hands, and she said, Farah, you're the real Wonder Woman. Aww. And I believe there's no greater loss than child loss. And, I work with other moms. We started a group called Angel Moms of the Desert. And it's to help other mothers who are on this journey, who we never wanted to be part of this club, but we paid the worst dues possible. And I just ran into a childhood friend of mine who lost her 14-year-old daughter, and she just said, how do I even go down this journey? And there were women who were on it further than me, and so they helped me, and it's my opportunity to pay it forward. And so
how do somebody get in touch with you about that?
So a lot of times so we do have a Facebook page, so Angel Moms of the Desert, they can look that up. And pre-COVID, we actually did have some lunches together. A lot of it now is just more posting. There's moments at night when it gets really quiet where we can text each other or just post and comment. And I think that there's a saying, turn your pain into purpose. And there's a reason I've gone through all of this in my life. And I hope that I can help somebody else on their journey. And so that's where I'm at.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. Yes. Very true. Very true. So one piece of advice you might have for either the little girl you once were or the woman that you now are that might be listening and need to hear it.
Don't change. I'm getting emotional.
I know. Yeah.
I think that, I think there were so many times in my life that I kept giving power to people to please them. And here I am at 47 years old, and I'm back to me. And I missed the moments that I missed me along the way. I didn't know I was there. But I think I was trying to hold on to people that didn't deserve me. Trying to please people like my counselor who didn't see me. And, we always say, love that person in the mirror because you have to love you first. And I know there's all these quotes, but until you really live it. And, I've been single for a very long time. I'm scared to put myself out there, but I also I remember saying after my husband left, I'm oh my God, I was on this urgent path to fill that void.
Right.
And then I realized as a boy mom, my job wasn't to find Mr. Right. My job was to raise Mr. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think I did a great job with both of my sons. But honestly, for me, and looking back at little Farah and to any young girl, I would just say, yeah, don't change, be you. And as you stand in your authentic self and as you grow and you learn to love the person that you are, the people that will truly support you along the way will gravitate to you. I know that there's some person out there that's going to end up being my lifelong partner, that's going to love me completely for me. And there's this saying, we're all just walking each other home. And so I think along the way, as I walk in my truth and who I am, the right people will follow me and will walk with me along the way until I say goodbye.
Yeah, I love that so much. This has been so wonderful.
Thank you. So Thank you.
Can I have
a hug? Of course. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right. Until next time, everybody.